Hi folks, welcome back to Cretacea Park. This time it's a speed build setting up Hell Creek Station. As you can see, I did a little bit of preliminary work. The exhibit fence is laid out. I've already got animals in there, set down some buildings, and the start of a viewing platform. So there's a Pato Apparel, a rest area, and a doubled T-Rex cafe that I'm going to be setting up inside the Hell Creek Station Mall. Uh, so a significant chunk of this build will be doing that. I'm starting with the inside when it's easier to see what I'm doing before all the walls and the roof go on. As usual, I managed to get ahead of myself a little bit and have to do some work under a roof. Um, it comes with doing this stuff on the fly rather than having a bit of an OCD planned outing for one of these videos. So today we'll also be watching me lay in foliage for the actual exhibit, and that section is going to be a bit faster than the building build because it's quite long, and already this video is running a little long for the videos I've been doing. So I'm using the brushed aluminum to represent the openings for all of the they're not all shops, but you know the operations inside the main building. There's just one for the two T-Rex cafes. The intention being here that this is really all one cafe. It's not really two separate buildings. Obviously, the guests will use it as two separate buildings, but they will come through this single opening. So to break up the look inside, I've got three different textures going on. And there's a pretty obvious jump here because I'm continuing to have my issues with saving the videos or sometimes even getting them recorded. The walls have a couple of different textures on them, built with singular sections and then duplicated to make the enclosure for the buildings. Right now I'm working on the roof. I've also got a band around the walls, which you'll glimpse in a couple of places. That's to give some dimensional texture to the outside walls. And I've also already in place glass fixtures in the front of the building. You see that a little bit later in some close-ups of that. And dome skylights over the pedestrian area of the building. As I have in other buildings, the roof is being set up to use some of the existing detail in some of the buildings, just to add some more flavor. I'd like to be able to add more texture to the roofs, but we don't have those props yet. And the thing I'm building now is a screening element because there would be windows in the T-Rex cafe capable of seeing out into the enclosure. And I don't want them to see the point of view area that we're looking at the image from, because that's going to be a backstage area. And it will be something I will get to down the road. I haven't put in any animal care facilities for the Edmontosaurus in this exhibit yet, so you won't see those in this video. I'm now putting in mulch using that marvelous expandable mulch to fill in space with minimal pieces. And this is going to be landscaped to give the guests in the cafe something to look out over into the exhibit and help them feel a little more in the exhibit, even though they are behind glass and above it and a little bit further away. And then also some of these plants will provide additional screening. The bamboo is great for that. To the backstage area so they don't look out. I guess that would be to their rights and see the stuff that annoys guests when they see how a zoo works. I don't know about you, but I'm one of those people who actually is interested in seeing how a zoo works, and I don't think I would mind that at all. But it's a game, and it works that way. Actually, we don't know if it will work that way. You know, certainly Planet Zoo does. Guests get annoyed at the darndest things, even when they, as if you take their point of view, literally cannot see them. But, you know, it is a game, so there are going to be little oddities in it that just, you know, don't make a ton of sense, but it's the way the game works. And so I decided after that little look around that I needed a platform area for that backstage bit. And I didn't want to spend a lot of pieces on it. I noticed the alley there and decided to make that part of the building in short order. Inadvertently converted that platform from concrete to wood, and I didn't want that. So it had to be reconverted and then set up to work with the screening element that keeps our guests from looking into the area. This whole video is going to be a bit longer than some of the others have been, even with the speeded up sections, because I'm doing a lot here. The habitat is quite large, and it takes time. This was a bit of remedial work here when I saw exactly where the window would be, and that needed to be addressed. So a little more mulch, a little bit moving of the slat wall, and it gets taken care of pretty easily. So the whole building so far, it's looking good. Not happy with seeing the T-Rex signs above there, but I'll be dealing with that in a bit. So scanning around, and I have dealt with it. Another piece of lost video, I'm afraid. But I raised part of the platform and put a band of the metal wall that I modified the size on. And in this stretch, you can see those windows, the entrances to the building, the little bump outs with the palm trees, and all to add some visual interest to the front of the building. And that kind of brings us to the viewing platform. This will be the main viewing platform for the Edmontosaurus exhibit, which ultimately may not turn out to be just Edmontosaurus, because Hell Creek is one of the better represented habitats in the game, with a fair number of animals. And much like the Dinosaur Park formation animals that are in the Bear Paw Forest exhibit, I'm anticipating down the road that a park of this design would have a safari ride to go through those areas. So 2 late Cretaceous safari rides here in this part of the park with these more complete ecosystems. You know, if the demo is anything to go by, this will be fun to build. It'll be interesting to look at, and I'm hoping really neat. So you're actually going to see a first attempt that I decided not to go with, building a roof out of the same material that the platform is, trying to get it lined up and sized and get it over that middle area. And I encountered a glitch and had to swap it out to a different design. I've built an arch, again with modified metal building things. You see me here reproducing it. That's a modified tarp to be the roof element, and expanding it out to cover the area, testing the idea whether I wanted it to go all the way out essentially to the street, deciding that that didn't work out. So away it went, and now I need to connect the platform to the pathing, and do that with ramps of the same material as the platform, and then trim it out. So I'm spending a fair bit of time on that platform in this video because I spent a fair bit of time working on it. It really is one of the longer exhibit areas that I've spent working on in this park so far. Um, so I decided to have the double ramps up there to cut down on the flow because they're only 4-meter ramps and the path is, I think, like 9 meters. Putting little bits of concrete to have a slight ramp up from the ground level or the path level to the platform level and make the transition blend in, break up the texture a little bit, all with the intent of making things look less like it's built out of modular pieces that you have limited control over, and more like some architectural design plan. So I'm going to put planters using the concrete to set the boundaries to again break up the what's there, this time breaking the hard surface up with more organic things, the plants that are going to be in there, and provide a little tiny bit of immersion for the guests as they would come past the plants, natural things onto this unnatural man-made platform to gaze out into the natural habitat of the Edmontosaurus. So, just making up just what the details will be, and that central area, of course, will be planted as well. Noticed a couple of glitches that the savings had left me with the platform, and it needed some cleanup to bring it back into line. Relatively quick part of the operation, but something that needed to be done. So having looked at this and not liking to see all that stone unrelieved, I decided I would put coping on this central planter area. Ultimately, after looking at that and comparing it to the outer wall, I decided I need to do the same thing for that, which was a little more complicated. So I decided to start with a range of taller plants, setting them in first since there would be the main visual attraction. Some tree ferns in among those taller palms, and then the ground plantings to fill the bulk of the space. Hey, you probably noticed right now that there is no railing on this. We'll be getting to that. Can't have our guests falling into the Edmontosaurus. Not that I would expect the Edmontosaurus to eat our guests, but the fall will be bad enough, and they might inadvertently get trampled by hungry herbivores. Or who knows, maybe they would decide that the guests were some threat to their youngsters or eggs or something. Not that they do that yet, but that is planned. Both the ontogeny of young animals growing up to full-grown animals, but the animals breeding in exhibit. So, unlike Jurassic Park, of course, this will not be an accident. I suspect we will also get contraceptives to keep the animals from breeding when we don't intend them to. So I decided to do some larger trees there, also providing a certain amount of shade over the entrance area, a useful thing for guests in a tropical environment. The tarp that you see over the viewing platform, I envision as something on a mechanical winch. So each of those panels can be winched up around the curvature of those supports to provide more or less coverage on the platform, also allowing the plants to get some sunlight at various times. And now it's time to start dealing with the foundation plantings for this station. So rather than using a lot of pieces for the mulch, I'm using the ground painting to put in substrate and leaf litter to give a similar kind of texture that I can put plants on and get a ground texture look coming through any shrubs or low-lying plants that go in there. So while I'm doing that, I'm also catching a little bit of that texture up onto the opposite side. And before I put that in, I realized I needed to connect the platform completely to the path, and decided to make that an expansion of the path, not just a little lane. And then following that, decided I wanted to trim it up and make it flow a little more naturally across the front of that entrance that's opposite the cafe. If we had signs, I would anticipate putting signs out on this face of the building, because that's kind of the commercial thing you do. People look at this big building, they don't know what's inside. They need to know, particularly if you want them to come in and spend their money there. So the left-hand building would be the T-Rex entrance. The entrance you see on the right would be toward the restrooms directly. That's a family restroom, by the way, so it's the bigger one, and the entrance there is a little bit bigger. It's actually, I think, wider than the entrance for Apato Apparel, which I'm treating as the main Hell Creek Station entrance, and you'll see what that gets to mean a little bit later in this video. So lots of modular ones for this, because in narrow spaces like this next to a path, the painting brush sometimes just refuses to put down plants or throws them onto the path, and I decided that I just spend a little bit of extra time rather than the extra frustration trying to get things to happen. I wanted to add some slightly taller ones to break up the low-level stuff, and also blend a bit with the ones that are in the windows. And then a few more even taller ones along the path to provide shade again, and also provide a little more visual interest. I have left the high terrain there on the side of the path that we're looking from, because I haven't made a firm decision about what is beyond on that side of the path, whether it's going to need to be a separator from a different part of the paleo environment or not. So I had missed out putting a cover over the restroom style entrance, so I had to come back and drop that in, and you see me adjusting the sizes of things to fit with that area. That was a pretty easy fix. But fixes happen, particularly when you're working on the fly like this without a hardcore thing. And you'll notice I'm fixing that one too, because it ended up for some reason taller than all the other window boxes. And the also means that the plant is badly out of position. And I had a little bit of extra wall there that I needed to fix and get in place, because I didn't want a solid wall across that turn in the exterior wall, because it would have messed up the window thing. So tried to be a little creative using the archway to fill in that space. It does mean that the segments of the metal wall are a little bit wider, but I think I can get away with that, since this is a unique, if you will, wall that isn't like the others. So I'll run here again, working out some of the details in the building. My initial placement on these plants wasn't far enough into their planting boxes to get near the glass, because I was afraid of having them come through. And you'll see later that indeed I have some come through and have issues dealing with them. So a little bit of ground cover to fill those boxes. It's all rather by rote, but then that sort of fits the nature of the building. Looking at it from this angle, I saw the concrete that was in the wrong place, so had to fix that. But I also noticed that that wall had no egress from the mall into the viewing platform. And the viewing platform itself extended into the mall and was a slightly different level. So we can't have our guests uh, tripping over that. So we want to put in a ramp. So a little bit of concrete, hit the wrong button and have to do it all over again. Get it down there and go with the effect that a different material will warn people that there is a step up. Ultimately, maybe I ought to put in some kind of warning striping, but I don't have the tools to do that just yet, so that will have to wait. And putting in the opening required an archway and taking out some concrete and adjusting the foundation concrete to match to the opening. I'm still not sure what doors will do in the long run with our guests being able to use spaces. So I just decided to put in a glass archway to denote that that is a clear entrance exit area. So it's finally time to make sure our guests don't fall in among the Edmontosaurus. Just admire them from a healthy distance. And I decided to do a simple railing. A little bit of futzing now and again to get the sizes working well between the arches and also to sit well on the concrete. Shorter segments for the curved area. Yeah, I've done this before. It's a thing you have to do because we don't have the curved fences. And it can be fussy sometimes as it's being here. I still haven't put in the coping on top of the stone. That's coming. And, as I look at this thing and look at the railing, because I wanted the more open feel to this viewing area, I'm probably going to have to come back and put catch barriers so our guests don't drop their cameras and food and children over the fence into the exhibit. I'll have to give some thought as to what that will look like. It may turn out to be easier now that we have the mesh wire material that is much like the mulch, scalable without screwing up the proportions. That makes it very good, and I'd have to build a frame for that. So this is the coping going in. I decided to lay it all out as separate elements this time rather than doubling the rock and shrinking it and then changing the material. In part because that would have been a bigger shrinking, in part because I just did it this way. Sometimes that happens. This created a little bit of an issue with the round corners because even though widening the coping, it doesn't work the same all the way around the curve of the wall. So it's a little fussy and a little hard to get right. But it looks good from this side, and that's where it will be seen mostly by real world visitors who come to check out the park. So I guess that will mostly do. This is me attempting to get it a little bit wider so more of it works better from the park visitor side of this structure. Choosing to do the straight lengths separately so the proportion stretches are all in the correct direction for what they have to cover. A little bit of bump out there, and I decided to keep it because of the changeover from the viewing platform to the plantings around the viewing side of the cafe. Looking around, checking on things, doing cleanup, as one has to do on these things, particularly once you start taking elements off the grid on your modular builds. They stay part of your group, but they don't necessarily go where you want them. But overall, I think it's been shaping up pretty well. There's still a few more details that I will be getting to. I'm liking the overall look of it. And so time to put in some guest amenities with some benches and trash cans. I'd like to put them where the guests can sit down and still, assuming the crowds aren't too thick, see through to the animals. Or where, grandma can sit while the kids are geeking out on the dinosaurs. And trash cans in various places. This may not be Disney standard spacing, but it is a little more aesthetic, at the entrances and the places where people pass, where they think about throwing things away as they enter or leave space. So running them down along the building, a little bit more Disney spacing here. Guests don't like to go too far carrying their trash. Disney has it down to a science. Little bit of glitch with the plantings there. They're not only too high, but they were also in the trash can, which I decided was not optimal. So this is the part I mentioned earlier about going back inside and working under a roof again, putting trash cans and some benches inside the Hell Creek Station Mall, and making decisions about where to place them as I look around and slide through the building. I need at some point to come back and put a staff door at the section the end we just left, because they will need to get into the back of the building. And I think you're going to get to see me put a staff door in that hole there that we just discovered. So first some walls, and then put in a little staff door at the end of the narrow corridor. Very much the sort of thing you see in at least American malls, where there'll be the doors are not right on the main pedestrian area. And, ideally when we get props like security cameras and stuff, this would be a prime area, at least in American malls, to be covered by a security camera, because it is a place where a malefactor could possibly drag a guest in a lightly attended time in the park and do their nefarious business. We don't want that in our park. We want our guests to be safe and happy and enjoy the dinosaurs and enrich our coffers. Because why else do you open a park to the public unless you want to make money from your fabulous dinosaurs? Well, there's the aesthetic reasons, because that's why we as gamers are doing it. We think it's great. Some of us, well, as builders anyway, the gamers may want to see those coffers go up. But if you look down at the money on this park, it's been happily sitting at $17 billion for a long time now. It's not going up from there. I'm not entirely sure why that is the case, because it got up there pretty quickly. So a couple of planters over the walls at the restroom, and brings a little bit of color in, and just makes it look nicer. So this is me fussing with being able to select things, because I'm trying to get that bloody palm there back inside its little glass cage, and I can't select it no matter what I do. And that's probably just going to turn out to be an alpha glitch. It happens. And it ultimately got solved by coming out of this, saving, and coming back in. I was finally able to select it and fix it. I don't know if that got caught on the video or not. Again, a cruise through to see how things are looking. Guests have finally made it up to this area, and so that gives you some sense of scale. We have a jump here, of course, as is obvious by the Hell Creek Station sign. I decided not to put y'all through building the letters for this one. We've got another speeded up letter building sequence coming up, plus also the video issues. But, it doesn't really hurt that you don't have to sit through that, I guess. So the stand-up sign as on the path, it's a main approach from the park, and setting up to do a little bit of planting in front of it to set it a little more into the environment. I'm not sure. My memory's a little fuzzy for me on whether I had already pulled out the Hell Creek Station logo and put it on the building in a couple of other places. Probably did, but you will probably catch glimpses of them a bit later in some of the videos. One of the logos went next to the Pato Apparel entrance, and I copied the whole stand-up thing here for people who will ultimately come to the station from the other direction through a connector to another part of the park. Well, there's my answer to what my memory couldn't remember. Pulling the letters off and moving them down to put them in on the building itself, right there at the door to the Pato Apparel, and discovering that the letters aren't all quite lined up as well as they could be. So decide to hide that a little by making them deeper and then pulling it out. And there's grabbing the whole sign and moving it down to our viewing platform. Having brought the sign down, it's time to do the other letter section. And the setup here is a column, metal column that I'm using as a base set into the rock here for the exhibit name. And so I'll be fussing a little here, getting it in the right place at the right height so it blends in happily with the rock that's providing the habitat enclosure there. And it's the Edmontosaurus name, so a speed build section going a little speedier still to get the letters in place. So zippity-doo-dah, we go through Edmontosaurus getting spelled out and sized right and lined up, and then we can get back to the build proper. As one does, the base needs to be adjusted a little bit, and an overlook, checking out how things are looking, seeing something I want to do, possibly getting to it. Yeah, I think I did get to it. I put viewing screens on the wall before bumping out into this also speeded up section of tricking out the habitat for the Edmontosaurus. A lot of brush work for foliage, putting in trees, then stuff around the pond, and then more trees. These are big animals, so they're not going to have a lot of brush in this exhibit. There will be some, of course, but a lot of open spaces, space between the trees for them to move. A lot of the brush around the edges of the exhibit where these big animals actually can't move all that well. So some rock work to break up the large stretches of substrate and grass, particularly near edges, near the drop-off, near the pond, and then a switch to the other side where the river is, and setting up a reason for this little bit of water that's separated from the river to serve as a drinking pool for the habitat animals. More rocks on that little bit of a berm down to the river. So this pool, this inlet rather than pool, is getting rocked off, mostly to keep animals out of it. Since it's a raised area, it makes sense to have some more rocks here for why there's a drop-off, that the river can't get the same kind of action against this area. And then some substrate work, sand in the river, and other textures to blend it in and make it look a little bit more natural. And with a fair bit of time spent doing all that painting work, it becomes time to start putting in the water edge plants. Um, like I said at the beginning, this is a very extensive habitat, way bigger than the Edmontosaurus need, but they won't be alone in there forever, I think. Uh, I mean, in the real world, of course, this is an alpha build, so, yeah, I may need to rebuild this again. But, it's practice for making me understand what works, what doesn't, what will be good looking, what might be less good looking. Um, but, as I said, Hell Creek is a very populated formation for this game. So there are a lot of animals that can share this habitat, and it may even enlarge to accommodate them, particularly if there's going to be a safari through it. So, also going back in, deciding with some of my plans, there were too many plants in some places, or the ground texture wasn't quite what it should be there. And then the chasm separating the Edmontosaurus from our next exhibit animal needed some love to give it a little more hard texture than what the rock painting does, and a little bit on the other side as well, because they're two parts of the same thing, and a little bit ahead to where that next enclosure will be. You can see the bridge on the left, that and the path that goes beyond it. Uh, I'll have a little bit more to say about that. A couple of trees down for something different in the enclosure, and I probably should have more of that kind of stuff around. But it is, after all, a zoo enclosure, and it won't be everywhere. Um, and this is already running to be a pretty long video, and we don't want it to take forever, even though it may feel like it's doing it. Many hours in this extensive space. But we're coming close to the end now, and give you a little peek down the road to where we're going next. Thanks for stopping by. It's Dino Bob. Subscribe or like, and see you again in another video.